Hello, welcome to Music City Online. I'm Nashville producer Gary Earl, and we're pleased tonight to have a 2-for-1 here, and it's guaranteed results or double your money back. After all, the ticket's free, right? So we're very pleased to have with us tonight the award-winning indie artist Shantell Ogden. This is her new album, set for release on the
28th of April.
28th of April. And what she's bringing to us tonight is the indie album release roadmap. We'll give you links that you can go online and get further information about this. And that's what we'll be talking to tonight. And later on, we'll be speaking with her publicist, who is Sherry Lacey of Good Stuff PR over on the side.
Right there.
There we go. So, Shantell, you've had great success in getting radio airplay on your own music, as well as TV and film placements, right? You want to tell us a little bit about that?
I think when I started becoming an indie artist, 15 years ago, I really thought about what I wanted to see with my music. And it's definitely been, for all indie artists, I think it's a journey of the next step in your career. It's not at least for me, I haven't found a lot of big leaps forward. It's just small steps that you continue to build in your career. And, I've been very, very blessed to have some wonderful opportunities in film and TV. And I know you've done a lot of film and TV work over the years as well. And that's been very helpful to my career and just making people aware of my music as a singer-songwriter. And then last year, I worked on my first radio promotion campaign. Cool. And had some really neat successes that I wasn't really expecting. And I think that's part of being an indie artist too, is kind of putting yourself out there beyond the comfort zone to see what could happen with your music. And I know we'll talk more about that as we kind of go through the roadmap, but I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having us on the show.
And I'd like to make a comment about something you said about a series of small, steps rather than big leaps. I've been fortunate enough to have worked with and been around and know several major artists, and to them, it's always a series of small steps too. To the public, we perceive like, oh my God, they broke out big, this one. But to them, that it's always small steps all the way through, and it continues on. I'm trying to remember who it was. In fact, I think it may have been, there was a major artist who recently said that the biggest difference when he had major success, the only thing that changed in his life was the checks that came in the mail were much larger.
Yeah.
So,
which is nice.
Yeah.
Otherwise, to him, it was the same as it had always been.
Yeah.
Very telling.
It is.
So what about, considering your indie album release roadmap, so what about preparing to record?
Well, I think that if you're an indie artist or even if you're on a major label, it's really important to think about who you are as an artist and have a really clear idea of what message you want to send into the world through your music. And for me, it's been very important for me as an artist to write songs that I felt were authentic to who I am and reflected kind of the view I have of the world. So I would say and it's important to kind of be honest about maybe where you're at with certain things about songwriting. To either write with, if you're not as strong a writer, you may want to work with writers who are more advanced in that. So, because I think if you're going to make an investment in your music and work with someone like yourself and recording and your wife, Robin, and producing vocals or whatever, whoever you might be working with, it's important to bring a quality song into the project. And you can't really take a song, in my opinion, that's not a strong song and make it wonderful. I think you can take something that's kind of average and make it better, but I feel like it's really important, especially because in my view, the reality is as indie artists, we're competing with major label artists. Not at least when it comes to the music, right?
And so something you said there that strikes a strong chord with me is about being real to who you are and being true to who you are. I've started working with a young pop girl recently, and she had worked last year with a pair of producers from LA who told her that her pop dance thing wasn't really going anymore and that she needed to go more alternative, and they named a current in vogue alternative girl. But that wasn't who she was at all. And so it was totally wrong. But they said, well, you should try this because that's what's selling right now. And as I said before, I've known a lot of major artists, and the ones that last, the ones that have staying power, are always people who stay true to who they are, and they do what they really are, what reflects their real inner personality. The one-hit wonders tend to be people who, tried something different, and maybe they got one lucky song and then they're off the roadmap.
Well, and that actually kind of leads me to a couple of pre-questions that we got from Twitter. And thanks to everybody who tweeted us questions. We've got some wonderful questions here. One of the questions that came from Nicole Shahan out in Utah, she said, what are some parts of releasing an indie album that you see are the most often overlooked? And I would say making sure those songs are as high quality as you can possibly make them is one of the things that's often overlooked, and obviously the production values of the actual music. I know we'll talk more about kind of what happens after you have the record, but I would say those are a couple thoughts. So that's kind of taking us through the production of the record. And I think, it's kind of like, it's when the record is done that I feel like the real work begins.
That's often very true. Often very true. The promoting the record. And this is the part, unfortunately, that most of us, this is not why most of us sign up for music. We sign up for music because we have these feelings we want to express, and we write this song. We're like, oh, this is wonderful, this song, But then comes the part about promoting it, and that's so,
right. And that's where Sherry comes in.
So,
bum.
Sherry Lacey of Good Stuff PR. So,
Yes, sir.
All right. So now, she's got a new album coming out, right? So, what effective strategies will you be using to get media reviews?
Well, we've been talking for months, so that's kind of one of the initial things that I think it's overlooked, is working far enough in advance, because what I do, we've joked, is not brain surgery, but it is persistence and time and effort and relationship and all of that, and that takes time. So if you
call footwork,
right? So if you try and cram the promotion part of it into a month before you release something, you're really doing yourself a disservice, because that's just, it doesn't get the attention it should. When you open any business, or you're a songwriter or an artist releasing an album, I think a marketing and promotion budget can often get shoved to the side, because you've been through the process of the creating and birthing of whatever this is, and you've already felt like you've bled every dime that you've made to get that to work. So it's understandable, but it's I don't say this just because this is my living and it's a mistake. You have to work a marketing and PR budget into your release if you want it to have any sort of recognition as far as being noticed, because those things don't just happen.
Well, and a point here, not to interrupt, but perhaps the single biggest thing that major labels can bring to an artist is marketing. So if you're an indie artist, that's the last thing you want to overlook, because that may be where you need the single most assistance and help, and
it's really a pivotal part of the release, because once you have the product, and it can be the greatest thing since apple pie, but if nobody ever hears it, then everybody knows that that's your goal. You're making music, you're creating so that it can be shared and people can hear it. So someone like me, Shantell brought someone like me on board, because that's where my specialty is. And or any publicist that you might work with, you want to make sure that not only do you have a good rapport with them, because you'll have a lot of interaction with them, but they bring relationships to the table. They bring the ability to pick up the phone and call someone, or if they can't get someone on the phone immediately, they have the persistence and the wherewithal to keep at it until they get an answer either way. And it takes a lot of footwork.
Good example is when I was singing in Nevada in my early days, I played with an amazing, brilliant jazz fusion pop rock guitar player from London. Just absolutely stunningly brilliant. And even when he was young, his band opened for Fleetwood Mac on their world tours and things.
Wow.
Well, anyway, my buddy John, after our band split up and I moved to LA, he did this brilliant jazz fusion album. I mean, it was just, from a musician's standpoint, it was wonderful. And all he did was post it on CD Baby, and he couldn't figure out why he wasn't getting huge sales. And I talked to him about that. I said, well, look, you need to be promoting, you need to be marketing, you need to get a publicist, you need to be out on the road playing, you need to be, and he's like, I'm not going to do that. What are you doing? I go, well, I mean, that's.
And anytime there are certainly exceptions to this, but anytime you open a magazine or you look online on the front page of XYZ, website, or you look in the newspaper, anytime you see a feature on somebody or a review on somebody, in general, there's somebody that's been behind that, working that, pushing that to the forefront to get them to pay attention.
I probably shouldn't tell this secret, but when I was in Reno and Vegas and Tahoe, they have little weeklies, so the tourists come in to see weekly, see who's playing where, and it has reviews, the major showrooms, all this. And I was playing cabarets in the small lounges or opening in the opening for large acts and showrooms. And I went to the paper and asked them to do a review of me, and the guy is an old guy with the bald head and big toe. He's like, "What do you think I am? I'm the only guy here. I gotta win." He's going, and he said, so why don't you write about yourself and bring it in? So every week I went in with a new photo of me and a new write-up with a different name on the write-up and gave it to him. Every week I got in, the rags. And every week, all the other acts around town would come to me and say, "What are you doing? You paying somebody? How you get all these reviews?" I couldn't tell them, because I was, there's only so much real estate. But what I was doing to promote myself was exactly what you're talking about.
Well, and I think that's a really good point from my standpoint. So I think that in addition to working with somebody like Sherry, that you can reach out to people who are bloggers that you're friends with. I think I'm continuing to do that, even though Sherry and I have a partnership. The bottom line is, like, there are so many blogs out there, indie music blogs that you can reach out to, and those people are very receptive to new music.
They are.
And I've even put together, as part of the indie roadmap, like little write-ups on how you can, like, reach out to these people specifically and what you can say. And I feel like, indie artists shouldn't be afraid of, like, stepping out there and representing themselves, in some smaller ways. And I think that only helps. Yeah, it does.
Most of us don't have time.
Yeah.
Because when I was in Reno doing what I was telling you about, I was like 24, 25 years old, unmarried, no kids. I sing 3-4 nights a week. I had all the time in the world to do it. And you know what? Not hardly anybody has all the time in the world to do it. So
I think that's
what we need.
I think that's part of it, definitely. And I think that's one great thing about having someone on your team like Sherry. I would also say that everybody can find an hour. Everybody can find an hour to send 3 emails a day,
and
or to tweet 3 things.
Because
right?
You need to think about it. As a team, you can't just say, "Here it is," make me a star.
Right.
You're right. You have to get everybody on board.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of tools out there that can help you do that as well. So, if you're doing social media, if you do get a review, gosh darn it, thank those people, and don't just do it once, do it 3 and 4 times, and you can schedule those tweets in different ways to get your your fans to go to that website or that blog to support them. So I feel like that's an important part of just kind of thinking about like, how can I make this an interesting story for a blogger or a friend, or and then, you know, work with people like Sherry. We've talked about some really out of the box things with me around this new record.
Yeah, I think sometimes I've been doing this for a long time, and while everyone would love to have, you know, that one great big gigantic whatever piece that is to you, whether that's a television performance, an Opry performance, the cover of the Wall Street Journal, whatever, you know, everybody has in their mind what they would love. What I'd encourage you to do, though, is think outside of the box on that. My experience, and I've worked with just about all of the major media as well as independent media, and have had some great successes on national television shows and things like that, but they don't always bring the biggest results. They look good on a resume and they look good to say, you know, I've been on such and such a show, but they aren't always the thing that brings the album sales or the most lasting impression with your target market. So really understanding who your songs go to, who your target market is, who hears and listens to you and would buy your music, and then thinking outside of the box in that realm. A really good example with Shantell, there's so many angles off of any one person. None of us is one dimensional. So thinking of yourself as anything but one dimensional is really the way you need to think. And your story has so many different facets to it, but that all leads back to you in the middle there. Go ahead.
Good point. I like the fact that you said your story, because very often, I think, especially more so with indie artists, maybe even than some majors, but very often people buy your music because they're buying your story. They're buying who you are, you know, your lifestyle. I mean, Kenny Chesney is a lifestyle.
He's a brand too.
It's the beach lifestyle. You know, and so I think that's a very important point you made there. By the way, we will put links on, you know, the video and things, but where can people reach you, both of you?
My website is goodstuffpr.com, and my contact information is on there, and I'm also on Twitter at Sherry Lacey PR.
Terrific. Okay. Cool. And where can we reach you?
So my website is shantellogden.com, and I'm on Twitter at Shan's Music, Facebook at Shan's Music, YouTube at Shan's Music, Instagram at Shan's Music.
And S-H-A-N?
S-H-A-N-S Music. Yep.
Gotcha. Cool.
So
very good.
There's a couple of questions here. We talked about this a little bit from Iris. What are some of the most effective ways to promote your album? We talked about some things. I would just say another thing that I would throw out there is going back to what we were talking about looking for angles. So my new record has a song called Ghosts in the Field, and I grew up on a farm, and so that's very real to me. Cool. And we looked at some media outlets that were agriculture related because of the story behind the song and my family farm. And so just try to think about like what makes your music uniquely you. And like you said, kind of looking at yourself as this hub in this wheel of different possibilities. There really are endless possibilities if you think outside of the box in that regard. So, you know, everything from, you know, farm and agricultural oriented things because of the theme of the album and Shantell's background, over and above the fact that these are just beautifully written songs and it's great music. Not to sound crass, but there's beautifully written songs and great music from a lot of angles. So you have to find a way to take that extreme talent that you have and make it stand out in another way. And media and news, you know, they're in a 24-hour news cycle all the time now. It's just the day we live in. So they're constantly looking for things to fill, but you have to be able to meet their needs. So, you know, everything from, you know, if you're working with somebody in the medical field on kidney issues, and you know that May is kidney, you know, month. Then you focus in on May for that. That's obviously not a music reference, but you get my point. You can take that in any direction
And it often works because then you've pinpointed what they need.
I think also from Iris, kind of the second part of her question is, what advice would you have for reaching out to radio stations? And I have actually, this is something that I feel like would be helpful for people. So last year when I decided, I did all the research and I found out that I wanted to do radio promotion, but I just didn't have the budget for it because it's expensive. And it's like $5,000 or $6,000 for an Americana record, but in the country market, you're looking at probably $10,000 on average a single or more, right? Depending on what chart you're promoting to.
Well,
so
and sometimes a lot more than that.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I guess what I would say is what I did is I did all the research, and then I sat down with a consultant for about an hour, and I had him break it down for me. And I've written a blog that's part of this indie release roadmap that says DIY radio promotions in 7 steps. And so, Iris, if you will just look at that blog, and if you've got any other questions, feel free to ask me.
And you probably covered this in your blog, but a lot of local radio stations have feature local musicians. Here in Nashville,
that's a great point.
Radio Lightning 100.1 features a lot of local indie artists, Americana artists, indie artists, singer-songwriters. They have, I believe, an entire evening devoted to it, as well as pitching it all the way through. There are other avenues too. I know a writer that I've did some producing for in Kansas City, and he took his song to the local radio station, and it's the theme music for the Drive Time radio program.
That's great.
And he was sort of downplaying it. He said, well, it's only AM. But I went and quickly looked up, on the, what do you call the ratings they use?
SoundScan?
No, but Nielsen. Well, anyway, point is, this AM radio station reaches an audience of about 7.8 million people in that area. Kansas City, Wichita. I mean, it's got a huge outreach, and his song now is selling for that.
And see, the important thing with something like that is that like you said, that was a bigger deal than he was making it. So then you as the artist think, okay, you don't want to just sit on that.
Don't downplay it.
Don't downplay it, because you can take that little bit of information and you can make something out of that. Everything from something as small as putting it prominently on the front of your website to sending out, some sort of a release, or, there's all sorts of things you can do to make hay out of that.
He had it listed on his PR one sheet as the theme song of a small local radio station.
Oh.
And I went and looked it up, and I said, no, this is the largest, audience radio station in the Kansas City metro area.
And that's, so I feel like as artists, like one of the things that we're really comfortable with the writing process, and we feel really strongly about it. But because a lot of times our songs and music is so personal, it's then hard for us to switch gears and to think about like promoting ourselves, which is another reason to work with somebody that can help you do that, because honestly, sometimes it's a little uncomfortable to pitch yourself to something, and it's nice to have someone who's not going to take, if it does, if it doesn't go well and you get rejected, she's going to take that rejection. If it does go well, she can push those things forward.
And along the same lines, people often take a lot more weight if you're being promoted by someone else. When I first landed in LA, I got a job pitching songs for a guy that was a co-producer on Happy Days, pitching his songs to soap operas. And I said, you're a famous writer, famous producer, why do you want me? And he was like, well, because if I pitch them, they're like, well, they must not be very good if you're pitching them yourself.
Yeah.
So I literally got on the horn and said, I'm a, and we were getting cuts.
Right. And if you don't, if you don't have the funding right now to work with someone, I think what you can do is there's people that you can get to intern for you that are in music business programs. And maybe if you write all of the emails and just have them send them and follow up, there's nothing wrong with doing that, especially when you're getting started, to kind of get some of those early things rolling.
But you have to you have to supervise
Yeah,
them very
for
well
sure,
if they're
for
interns
sure.
because
yeah.
otherwise you never know what's going to
Right.
happen.
Well, and I
Also
feel like
I want to
yeah.
encourage you too that let's say you're in a situation where you are not working with a publicist right now. You're starting out.
Uh-huh.
And maybe you're not ready.
And maybe you're
yeah.
not to that point yet. And I've met many people that they say, okay, we're local, we're ready, trying to take it to the next level, but we don't have a lot of media pieces. We're not ready for a publicist.
Right.
There's still so many things that you as an indie artist can do, but I would encourage you to do them well and with quality. And if it's not your forte, because none of us are good at everything, then find someone that, for example, who's a good writer and can write a good solid bio for you. And go online. Everybody's got their bios online now. Go online and find some reputable artists, read their bios, get a feel for how those are written, and have someone, if you aren't the writer, to do that, have someone that even just looks at it and in some ways can replicate the recipe of the bio, so to speak, and create a good bio for yourself. You don't have to have an enormous budget to have decent promotional photos taken, but you can, we talked about this earlier, have ineffective promotional photos taken that don't have the flavor that speaks to who you are.
Right.
But it doesn't have to cost you a fortune to do that. You can find ways to do that. Having a Twitter account, having a website, none of these things, in my estimation, off the top, are extraordinarily expensive.
Right.
They can be done, but you want to do them with quality because they're speaking to who you are. And I think indie artists can fall into that trap sometimes of wanting to do everything yourself.
Yeah.
And if you're not a graphic designer, but you're doing the graphic design on the album,
right.
Then
it looks like
you did it. So,
and I think, so you were asking me about my website.
Right.
So I've really tried to, as an indie artist, make sure that my online images and my website look as professional as possible, because that's my presence and that's my visual brand on the internet. So I work with someone who does my graphic design. And then for my website, because I didn't want to build a website myself, there's a tool called Bandzoogle that I use, and it's very easy, and it's like $150 a year. And they have templates. Yeah. It's all hosted. You can put music players. You can sell your merchandise. And to me, it's like, well, I could have spent $2,000 getting a WordPress site built, or I can spend $150, spend $100 on graphics, and have something that looks every bit as good, and spend the other money recording songs or doing whatever else I need to do.
I was on a flight back from LA once and talking to a girl beside me that her company designed websites, and I handed her my card, and she saw, Disney, HBO, and all these critics. Goes, this, blah, blah. And I said, I'll check out your websites. Like, this, I'll see about you guys doing my website. She said, I don't think that you'd want. And I go, why not? And she says, well, our website started at 300,000. They were doing things like Harvard, UCLA, and I mean, huge websites with thousands of pages. And so I said, I think I'll pass.
Right.
I don't think I need you.
Well, and I'll say one more thing. If you choose to, at some point in your career, want to work with a publicist, there are a lot of independent publicists that do what I do, and it's just as important to do your homework in that area, because all of us specialize in different areas. There are publicists who are deeply ingrained in the rock world, and that's what they do. And there's others deeply ingrained in country or bluegrass or Americana or jazz or what have you. And it's important to find someone that not only that you get along with, but that knows the world you want to live in, because they then will bring those relationships to the table and be able to help, massage success on your project, hopefully through those. And a good publicist has the ability to not just get to know you as an artist, but dissect who you are and who your story is, and know who to take that to. to pitch your story, to then get coverage on this album and your career.
Right.
But it's not always the same pitch to every publication or every outlet. And a good publicist will be able to decipher how to do that.
Right.
So this is something I normally do much earlier in the show, is ask you a couple of questions and I like to do that now. Take a moment. So Shantell, tell us a fun fact about yourself, something we wouldn't know about you that might be revealing or interesting to know about you.
So I think this happened so many years ago that probably most people don't know that I actually was on tour during the blackout of 2003 in New York City. And
in New York?
I was in New York City
Oh, wow.
when the blackout happened. And I remember
Wow.
I had played the bitter end the day before,
Oh, yeah.
and we were in the city doing some other things. And
Cool.
I walked 8 miles over the Queensboro Bridge to where we were staying. And I remember a very nice man gave me a popsicle.
Total blackness.
Never take a popsicle from a stranger.
I was
Wow.
so hot that day, I would have taken a popsicle from a criminal.
Didn't your mother ever
That's
teach you?
cool. So if anything that you'd like to share?
Oh gosh, well my job is to tell you
No,
about
no.
everybody else.
No,
Me.
it's something about you that we wouldn't know that might be a fun fact or something unusual. Something.
I was a flight attendant for years before I
No
became
kidding.
a publicist. So
Oh, that's cool.
that was, but I tell you, that was probably the best training
yeah.
ground for dealing with cold calling and talking to people
Yes.
and,
Exactly.
just getting to know people quickly,
Yeah.
really, in truly,
It's true. And how to
um,
read people.
and how to
things.
read
Yeah,
people. So
that's
I
true.
had a great experience doing it, but it's
That's cool.
translated into my life as a publicist in an odd,
That's
but
cool.
very logical way.
Shantell, if we happen to meet you at a party, for example, or at a performance where you're performing, what's a question we should not ask you? Maybe something you're tired of being asked too much, or just something that's off limits. What's something we should not ask you?
I really feel like I've had people ask me all kinds of random questions, and I'm pretty open. Like
Nothing.
if I feel uncomfortable about a question, sometimes, you get asked random questions that are kind of over the top and you feel
Okay.
a little uncomfortable. I'll just say, that's not
Well-
something I feel comfortable answering.
How about this one then? Okay. So, you know how a lot of movies open up like Shaft, Shaft has the theme Shaft, or like Staying Alive was, John Travolta's walking down the street. Staying Alive was the theme song. So what's your theme song? What's your theme song of your life?
The theme song of my life. Wow.
I give you a hardball.
I know. That's a really tough question. I mean, I would say that I sort of always have a soundtrack going. So like if I'm getting ready to go play a show, I might be thinking, Eye of the Tiger. And if I'm, kicking back on a Saturday morning, I might be thinking, Alabama, Born Country, or something like that.
So you're actually giving us the score of your life more than
I think I might
The theme
might
song.
be more of a score
Different
person.
songs to different days.
Well, I'm a
Okay.
songwriter. How can I pick just one? There's so many great songs.
So which question would you
gosh.
like to answer those?
That's really what I was waiting for.
You
Question.
just wanted him to pass it to me.
Do you have a theme song, or is there a question we should not ask you?
I'm an open. I'm an
Okay.
open book. I'm fairly fairly honest and straightforward person.
Right.
So I am perfectly within reason. Okay with I like talking with people and sharing, and I believe we
Right.
learn from other people in that way. So
Well, I'll give you another question then.
yeah,
You're having a dinner party
we're
at your
good at
house.
skirting the issues.
When did this turn into lying?
Yes, you guys are
You
really,
know, like-
you guys are really politicians.
Dinner party. I'm with you. Go ahead.
So you're having a dinner party. 3 songs that you play at your dinner party. That's
3
a
songs that I
softball
play at
question.
my dinner party. Goodness gracious. I am a big fan of, I like old American classics,
Mhm.
so for dinner party oriented stuff, I don't know if I have a particular song that comes to my mind, but more of a genre or style of music.
Oh, we need 3 songs.
You need 3 songs. Shake Your Groove thing doesn't count.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Peaches and her. That's dessert.
That's nice. That's a good one.
You know,
Peaches and her.
I love Rosemary Clooney, and I'm kind of
Yeah.
got a little bit of my grandparents in me in that regard. I love old school stuff and jazz. Nora Jones. I'm a big Nora Jones fan. So
that's cool. So nice, relaxed, easygoing stuff.
For dinner kind of stuff.
And then Shake Your Groove thing. When you want,
Shake Your Groove
that's
thing.
when you want everybody to leave. That's you turn up the volume and then they'll leave.
That's right.
Okay.
That or my 8-year-old daughter and I will rap the theme to Fresh Prince, and then everybody clears the room. So, and we do know that.
I mean, sometimes that's what you do have to do to clear the room.
That's right.
If you've got one of those parties where you can't get anybody to go home,
You just got to do what you got to do.
too much could drink.
That's right.
And they just want to stay. So
That's right.
So we've got
questions.
we've got just a couple more questions. Again, thank you so much for the questions, and please send us more questions or follow-up questions if we didn't cover it. We had someone
Terrence
BC,
which I assume is British Columbia.
So he says, it seems overwhelming. Where do I start? And I think that that's actually a really good question, because I feel like that's one of the reasons I put together the roadmap, because it kind of walks you through the different parts and pieces. And I think, it's okay to kind of start small and, just realize that. So now this album, is like my 7th record that I released. And so you get better at it each time. And I feel like doing it and just kind of taking those steps is helpful. And hopefully the roadmap is also helpful. And then we had someone, Karen Songbird asked about how do you stop people from talking while you sing? And, you had some thoughts on that before we went live tonight.
Well, the one thing I was commenting about was that I spent 9 years singing in Vegas, Tahoe, and Reno. And sometimes in the casinos, you can't get people to stop talking because they've been gambling all day and drinking all day. And it's not. So in that event, look for a different venue, look for more of a coffee house where you're going to get a more intellectual crowd that's more appreciative of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So there are those things, that go into it. And honestly, I mean, other than that, it's kind of difficult because, comedians can deal with hecklers, but as musicians, if you have a full band, you're loud enough, you don't have to worry about it. But if you're a singer-songwriter with an acoustic guitar,
there is something to be said for that, though, knowing the venue that you're in. I help book a couple of music series, and some lean more towards a social atmosphere, even though the music is appreciated, but the stopping's probably not going to talk because it's just the environment. So that's always something that we express and let people know ahead of time that's going to be a part of it. And you can speak better to it as an artist, but knowing what venue you're going into, I think is important.
The only other thing I would say to Karen and to any other indie artist is, we've all had those shows where you feel unappreciated and sort of like, I guess, disrespected kind of as an artist. Yeah. And I would just say, continue to be professional, finish out the set. You never know who's in the audience. I was playing at House of Blues Hollywood about 3 years ago, and I was in this room full of really loud teenagers, and I knew they weren't there to listen to my music. Not that I have anything against teenagers, but that's not really my typical listening audience. And they were loud and they were waiting to see the next artist. Well, I thought about it for just a split second. Like, should I just kind of finish, not play my whole set, but just kind of finish a few minutes early and kind of call it a day, because I know they're not here to listen to me. But I thought, no, I came this far. I want to finish this out and be professional. And you know what? I'm so glad I did, because on the way out, I ran into Randy Jackson from American Idol.
Oh,
and so you never know who could be sitting there and what that might lead to. So you may have somebody in the audience that, like, that one person that listens to you, that comes up to you and offers you another gig or really likes your music or buys a CD or whatever. So I think, you know, it's just important to kind of stay professional in those moments and just try to work through it the best you can.
I've got another anecdote along to answer that question that might be a good wrap up too for us. When my first day in Nashville, my ASCAP rep sent me, I'd been living and working in Los Angeles for a few years, sent me to Douglas Corner. He said, the new ASCAP writer in town down there, you got to go see this guy. He's great. I went down. It was the bartender and the writer and myself. And I sat there and he did 8 songs just for me and the bartender. Mm-hmm. And I was just floored. I was just like, oh my God, this is like, oh, this guy's so much better writer than I am. It's like, and I went out and I was, you know, giving him all this praise and he was, you know, down and just kind of glum and it's like, oh, I have been to everybody in town, nobody did blah, 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 blah. So fast forward about 12, 15 years, I'm on a committee at NSAI, Nashville Songwriters Association International, with the same writer who had tons of success. And I should, just as I haven't talked with him about this, I should probably not name him, but one of the more successful writers in the last 20 years or so. And I mentioned, I said, you remember that night? You know, it was my first night in town. And it was your first night in town. He goes, yeah. And he says, you know what? So I came to town with those 8 songs. And he said, everybody in town turned me down 2-3 times. Yeah. And he said, you know what? 6 of those 8 songs have been in the top 40 with major artists since then.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's retired and, you know, living well.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's just, but you know, he was a trooper. It was just me and the bartender, and he did every song he had.
When I think that's a good example, whether it's from the songwriting and performing standpoint, or even from the PR standpoint, that no one piece of the puzzle is too small. Really, as you're building this, one piece builds on another piece that builds on another piece. So even if it's a small local piece now, then you use that as fuel to help get something when you decide to tour regionally and get it in a newspaper that's in another state. And then once you have that, you use that to build on it to get it in another city. And, you know, each one of those pieces of the puzzle build on each other. And so never diminish what they are if they're quality and good things, because they can really turn into something down the road.
All righty, I guess we'll wrap that one up. So once again, good evening from Music City.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming on. And remember, the links are all over the video, and check in with our guest here and learn some more. Keep writing. Good night.
Bye.